Yeah, so Liz, on the topic of self-talk, this might be a concept that maybe was unfamiliar with you, maybe in high school, but obviously growing up and going and maybe just being mature, or going through the Southwestern Advantage program, that was a whole concept. Maybe that was open up to you. But well, how old were you, or when did you hear about this, or when did you recognize that you were maybe implementing self-talk without even being coached on how to properly do it?
Yeah, I think as an athlete, I mean, I ran track since I was in middle school, went to run to small D1. I think it was when I got to college that I actually realized, because I was a 400-meter hurdler, and my coach was like, you just got to go for it. You got to break this wall. And I was like, what wall are you talking about? And I didn't acknowledge that, it was my self-talk wall, right? What am I thinking going into that race? In high school, I relied a lot on my performance. I was all city. I was like, okay, I know that if I perform, I'm going to have those results at a meet. But when you get to a collegiate level, it's a lot more mental than it is just performance, both combined. So once I got to that level, it's like, okay, what are my beliefs, right? In LEAD, we talk about the cycle of self-talk, how your self-talk is going to influence your self-image, your actions, and then your actions, your results, right?
Yeah.
So if you start with self-talk, that's going to influence how I view myself, right? That's what self-image is the idea of my appearance, of my characteristics, who do I think I am at that point? So going back to athletics, do I think that I'm capable of going for a new personal best?
Yeah.
Am I capable of qualifying for the finals? So it wasn't until college where I really realized, like, okay, it starts with me. The result's going to happen, but it starts with what I believe in myself.
Yeah. I mean, now that you know what you know now, I mean, I think speaking on that concept alone is so good for anyone, regardless of whether you're an athlete or not. I think that was something that I wish that I had coaching on. Like, how would you coach yourself knowing what you know now prior to a track meet? Like, how would you do that? How would you handle that to manage that stress?
Yeah, I mean, stress is a big one. And when it comes to stress, it comes with what you're telling yourself about how you're perceiving that stress, right? Let's say if I go back to my high school self, I'm pretty stressed out about this championship, even though I competed in track for the last months, right?
Yeah.
I know I had personal best. I know I got first or third and whatever it was. So at that point, I wish I knew, like, hey, you got this. You already ran that same event plenty of times for the last 3 months. This one event is fine. Because one thing that I struggled a lot in high school is, once I left districts and competed at a higher level, like regionals or area, I would what we call like choke, right? Where it's like, what did I just do? I ran slower or maybe the same, and it's because of that mental block.
Yeah.
So I wish if I could go back to my younger self and say, hey, like, you got this, just do what you've been doing. So that's something just in athletics is they promote not to value whatever meet it is. Let's say in track, whatever meet, if it's the championship or just a regular weekend meet, don't value anything. It's all the same. Your performance is what's going to get you there, but then it starts with yourself. Or just academically too, right? If you go into an exam and you're like, hey, I got this, I studied, I'm going to be fine. You're already going into the exam more confident and you're not stressed out, compared to saying, oh, wow, I have no idea. I studied for the last 2 hours, but I think the exam is still going to be hard. You're going into the exam now stressed out. So does that make sense?
Totally. Share with us, what was it like maybe when you were in college, on how did your self-talk change? Maybe a sentence you would say to yourself that maybe you added on to that whenever you went into college.
I think for me, it was just really getting my confidence from what I'm doing. So I know that if I'm going to study for 4 hours, I'm going to feel good about myself. Compared to if I don't do anything, then I'm kind of leading myself to stress. So if I can coach myself like, hey, okay, you're doing the best that you can, right? It's a quote where it's all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. So that's a big self-talk change for me. Is okay, if I am studying, if I am going to see my professors, if I am in my study groups, if I am doing the best that I can, I'm going to be fine. Now, if the exam came back and it wasn't fine, then it's still your self-talk can be used. It's like, hey, I didn't master it this time, but that's fine. I'm going to figure it out. I have next week or have the following exam. So it's really just about what you're capable of doing. That's where your self-talk starts.
Yeah. It sounds like you're bringing or you're stemming your confidence from the things that you can control. You talked about studying prior to the exam or I guess, performing well in practice, that's going to give you confidence, or remembering past success at past meets to take the pressure off of the meet that you're currently in. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So now that, let's take this out of the I guess, the parameters of athletics. Like, maybe how have you transitioned that? You've adapted, or you learned this skill within athletics. How has that translated into the rest of your life?
My favorite one is just relationships and just communicating with people. I'll never forget, in high school you take, I think it's called like a speech class, where you go in and give your presentations. You do the same thing in college, but now you're standing in front of hundreds of people. I'll never forget when I was in high school, I used to always just play with my necklace or not know what to do with myself. And that's because I was telling myself that I'm not good at performing out loud in front of people. So when I went to college, I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Because once you do it once, the next time you do it, you're even better.
Did you recognize that in high school, that you were saying that to yourself? Or was it not until high school that you recognized it?
Mm-hmm. I think I did not recognize it in high school.
Yeah.
It's more the mentality of, oh, that's just who I am. I'm just an awkward person.
Nice.
Or, I just say
Okay.
the wrong things all the time.
Wow.
And that's really powerful with self-talk.
Yeah.
Because I hear a lot of people, oh, that's just the way I am. I'm just tardy all the time.
I was born this
or,
way. It's my
I'm always
personality.
late.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And that's where it starts, right? The big thing with self-talk is it's hard to be a better version of yourself because it takes time. But the biggest thing is it takes self-awareness. So I think that was a great question that you asked, if I knew that in high school, because I didn't.
Yeah.
In college, a couple years later, it's like, oh, I actually am the reason why I'm awkward. Or, oh, I'm the reason why I feel like somebody's judging me because I'm judging myself first. So that's really big.
Wow. I like what you just said, maybe the irrational thoughts that I'm having, it's more about me judging myself. Maybe there's no one else judging me out there. Maybe I'm just making this whole situation a lot bigger than what it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a good perspective.
And self-talk, it's, as a mentor, I always tell them, are you talking to yourself all the time? They're like, I don't know. It's like, yes, you are. Right now you're probably thinking about something as we're on this meeting. And I don't think a lot of people understand that self-talk is on a whole spectrum. It can be as simple as you hit your toe in the corner, it's like, ow, my toe. Or I'm really tired. Or I have to go to school today. Or the other hand, where, it can be a little bit more of an impact, where it's like, oh, I'm not really good at making friends. I'm never going to have friends.
Yeah.
Or I'm really good at studying math. I'm going to ace my exam. They're two different, but still very impactful.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said, there's one quote that comes to mind from Henry Ford, where it's, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Right? We are our biggest criticisms, our biggest encouragers, and that stems from our self-talk.
Yeah. Is it necessary for it to actually be verbal?
No.
Do you actually have to say it, or is it just merely thoughts, or is it better to say it with words?
It's definitely better to say it with words, but self-talk itself, it can be your inner voice or it can be verbal. The reason why verbalizing it is important is because it's coming out of your brain now, right? It's not just there.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend, if you are trying to change your self-talk, saying it out loud, right? There's a lot of affirmations that help.
Yeah. Yeah, Liz, I guess, has there ever been a situation where you were doing something that you had to do, maybe an assignment for class, that you didn't like, but you knew that it was important for you to, maybe you have to complete this to get to where you want to be? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Has there ever been a time where you walked into this and your self-talk was off or your attitude was off, but you knew that you had to get this done?
Yeah, I think the fact that you said attitude, that's so important. And I've gone through it personally and also just with the people that I've mentored. And we always talk about, okay, if you get your assignment, it's this really long essay, but you're thinking about it, you're really kind of killing your momentum, your attitude is bad, then your self-talk is going to be bad, right? When we go back to the cycle of self-talk, we talked about self-talk with self-image, actions, and results. It can also go the other way. Your actions can then affect your self-image and your self-talk. So if I know I have to write this essay and I'm already procrastinating, I'm complaining, then that's affected my self-image in a way that I either think I'm not capable or I'm going to be wasting time. My self-talk's going to be really negative. I have this assignment to do again. I don't want to do it. I can be going out hanging out with my friends instead. Mm-hmm. But now I'm here. So does that make sense, how my actions and the way that I'm perceiving this assignment is affecting my self-talk?
Totally. I think of when I was in college, and one of my best friends, she was really good at writing papers, but she would always wait last minute. And then she'd always complain about how she's always stressed.
Yeah.
But then she'd do a really good job on the paper. You know, it's just like sometimes we put ourselves in this situation, but even when we're there, we still end up performing well, but still what we're saying to ourselves is we're speaking over ourselves that I'm just so stressed right now, when it could have been a whole lot better if you were just encouraging yourself to be more responsible or better time management.
Yeah, or even if you get a job for the first time. You know, I did Southwestern throughout college and moved to Nashville right after college. But if I just were to work at McDonald's I did work actually in retail. I worked at Hollister for a couple months. And yeah, it's all about my attitude, my self-talk, right? I can have a negative perspective and think, oh, am I going to be folding jeans for the rest of my life? When I know I'm not.
Yeah.
But then that can affect what I'm doing in that shift.
Yeah.
Or I
Yeah.
can say, hey, you know, I have the opportunity to learn to communicate with people, to learn how to just provide a better service.
Yeah.
That is going to change my self-talk, because then I'm not perceiving as this, you know, minimum wage job as an opportunity for me to grow in my communication and my skills, how to handle money, how to organize. So that is important.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say this statement, and you just respond however you seem fit. Growing up, your narrative was written for you, but when you mature, your narrative will be written by you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like our habits, right? The reason why self-talk is so hard to change is because at this point, you've probably been doing it for years. You don't acknowledge that, but you have been. So now, all of a sudden, you want to be a better person. It's going to be hard to change it, because you have to identify it. You know, what are the positive things? What are the constructive things that you tell yourself? Then you also have the negative. Once you identify the negative, you have to replace it with a positive thought.
Yeah.
And then you have to practice it. And then it's going to be just kind of shifting in. So that's why it is hard. So,
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off.
oh no, that's fine. I'll just say, so growing up, you have these things that you believe from what other people tell you or just yourself. So when you mature and you acknowledge that, it's like, okay, well, what do I actually believe about myself? You know, what is true?
What's something that was said over you that wasn't something that was good that you believed, that you allowed it to be a part of your narrative?
Yeah, this one's funny, and it's the one that comes to mind right away. But I'll never forget, like I said, I was a great athlete in high school, made varsity as a freshman for track. And I'll never forget when my dad was like, hey, if you stop eating these frozen Hot Pockets, you might be a little faster. And I have not ate a Hot Pocket since then, right? But at that point, in high school, so in high school, you know, that's what I put on myself. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
actually, if I did eat better, I might be faster. But in reality, I mean, it is true to some extent.
Yeah.
But I carried that. And that's what happens
Yeah.
with self-talk, is it's what you think about yourself and what you're doing and what others think about you.
Yeah.
So I could have just said, oh, no, that's fine. It's just one. You know, I'm going to go tomorrow and have a great practice.
Yeah.
But at that point, I became self-conscious of what I was eating.
Yeah.
And it wasn't meant to be taken that way, right? It's probably a joke.
Yeah.
But then I had that. So,
It's so funny how these, I mean, I'm sure your dad was doing his best to encourage you, right?
yeah,
You know,
I mean,
but
he went
you
to every meeting. He's super encouraging.
Yeah.
So,
But you took it as a way of like, oh my gosh, I can never eat a Hot Pocket ever again.
yeah.
That's so fun. I remember when I was, I was like 11 years old, and I was just starting wrestling, and I wanted to get to this certain weight. And so I was, prior to my life in that, I've never been even conscious about my weight. But the one sport that I start doing, it's very specific on it. So I'm trying to lose this weight, and my brother and I were walking up the stairwell, and like we won't get out of each other's way, and we're like trying to assert dominance here. And he's 14, maybe a sophomore in high school at this time, and then he's like, "Get out of my way, chubby." And that just like struck my heart, because I was like, at that time, I was like, I've been trying to get to this place. And that actually affected my relationship with him for about a year, until I just took ownership of like, dude, it was just a bad time. We were just, maybe I was in the wrong of getting in his way, but man, once I understood that I don't have to allow what he said to be my reality, then I took ownership of like, I'm the one in charge, and I can make my life the way that I want it to be.
Yeah, and that's so good, because that's another part of self-talk, is just how you take a criticism and a compliment, right? And it starts with you. So if
Yeah.
you compliment me, it's like, hey, Liz, you know, your hair looks really good today. And I can either say, thank you, I appreciate it. Or I can say, oh no, like,
What does he
I
think
didn't
about all the other
straighten my
days?
hair today, or, you know, it didn't come out right,
Yeah.
or my outfit's not matching.
Yeah.
You're not really going to want to compliment me at that point. So your self-talk does affect the way that you take compliments and criticism. Or criticism once again, right? If my teacher were to say, hey, Liz, you know, maybe try something else in your essay. I can say, okay, cool. Like, I'll try it, I'll figure it out. If I had a negative perspective, it's like, oh, wow, I can't do anything right. You know, even my teacher is telling me that I'm making mistakes.
Yeah.
Or my friends are probably doing better than me.
Yeah.
So when you do have positive, constructive self-talk, you are able to take a criticism and learn from it. You are able to take a compliment and just move on, whether you agree with that person or not.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Yeah. It sounds like self-talk is really a skill or like a muscle that can be developed. Because if you don't practice this, then you will take maybe a compliment, but you might take it as a criticism.
Right.
You know, one of my favorite quotes is if you live by the praise of man, then you'll die by the criticism of man. And it sounds like what you're saying is if you can develop this skill, then you won't have to be inferior of what the opinion of man is. You'll have confidence or like something to ground you, essentially, to just stay the course of who you want to be without being distracted by what other people might say.
Yeah, and that's why self-awareness is so important. You know I struggle with it about remembering names. You know, it can be really easy to say, oh, I'm not really good at remembering names.
Yeah.
And that can be how I identify myself as just the way that I am. I'm just not good at remembering names. Once I identify it and I catch that it's not really positive, I can then say, hey, I am trying to remember names, or I'm getting better at remembering names. So my confidence is now up instead of down. And that's why constructive self-talk is important. I usually tell the people that I mentor, it's like a construction site or construction worker. They're usually building up. So you have to have the self-awareness to identify, is what I'm saying building myself up, or is it building myself down? And then being able to change it, that's a big part of just growth.
Yeah. Do you ever journal, or do you ever write things out at all? Or do you have things on the wall? Like, how do you, other than just when you say, like, do you do anything else like that?
Yeah, I haven't journaled in a while, but that's definitely something that I do encourage somebody is to journal, especially when it's your first time identifying your self-talk. What I have done in the past is sticky notes. You know, a lot of people correlate words of affirmations with self-talk,
Yeah.
and that's great. But usually self-talk, you're in this mentality of actually changing what's not right. And I can tell myself every day, oh, I'm beautiful, or I'm strong, or I'm super kind. But then if I'm not really believing it, then it's not changing my actions. It's not changing my perspective on the day.
Yeah.
But my self-talk, it's like, oh, I can choose to be happy today regardless of what goes on around me.
Yeah.
That's more meaningful, and it's going to be more impactful. So definitely recommend when you are changing your self-talk, write it down somewhere and keep practicing. That's a big component, is
Yeah.
just to practice.
That's good. Well, Liz, it's been awesome chatting with you, opening up my understanding of what self-talk is, how to apply it in different ways, like using sticky notes, for example. I don't think I've ever done that one, but it's been really fun enjoying.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.